So I will let Albert start his presentation everyone is waiting for. Okay, about the future outlook of aquaculture, aquafeed, nutrition, where we are today, where we are going, where we want to be going, right?
Okay, have you sent me the
Albert?
link? Yeah. Can everybody see this now?
Your
No, not
PDF.
for now.
Yes, open the PDF, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to give a 20-minute overview really about the current situation of aquaculture and aquaculture nutrition as I see it. The important part is that every nutritionist is a bit different. Everybody looks at things from different perspectives. So this is very much from my perspective. I like to thank, obviously, the Aquaculture Nutritionist Network that Kabir has set up. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here. Also, if it wasn't for Jeffo, we wouldn't be here too. And Annie and the whole Jeffo team have helped us set this up. And also on the other side, we have aquafeed.com and Susie. I am still the technical editor for aquafeed.com. And we need a platform where we can discuss things. This presentation will be available for everybody. So at the end of the presentation, please feel free to contact Annie to get copies of the presentation. For people that know me, in my previous life, I worked for FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. And my heart is still very much with them. But obviously the new aquaculture statistics has just been released. And of course, as soon as it's released, I like to start analyzing the data. Aquaculture has reached a new high. It's 114.5 million metric tons. The sector has been growing on average about 5.6% per year since the year 2000, compared to capture fisheries, which has been pretty static over the last 18 years. Aquaculture is a combination of fish, seaweeds, mollusks, and crustaceans. The value of the sector is about 263 billion US dollars. This is a farm gate value. Obviously, the value will probably be much more than that. The production, 114.5 million metric tons. This is landed fresh weight. So this is not processed product. And what I'm going to do very briefly after I go through the main producers is to talk a little bit about each of the sectors before I then go into the main body of my talk relating to feeds and feeding. The important point for people to realize is that aquaculture is still very much an Asian phenomenon. Over 91.75% is produced in the Asian region. After that, and the sector growing on average about 5.7% per year over the last 18 years. Followed by the Americas, 3.8 million metric tons. Followed by Europe, 3 million metric tons, and Africa, 2.3 million metric tons. Of the three other continents, Africa is showing the fastest growth rate of the sector. This is mainly because of Egypt, Nigeria, Uganda, where the aquaculture sector is really starting to take off. But the important point is that it's an Asian phenomenon. And the important point to remember is that the reason why aquaculture is so big there is in part also because fish is one of the cheapest forms of animal protein for people to consume. This is completely opposite in other regions of Americas, Europe, and Africa, depending on the country, where normally aquaculture products are normally a bit more expensive. But the important thing is that in Asia, it's people like to consume aquatic products. They view aquaculture as they view agriculture. So the top countries are, again, it's China is is the largest producer by far. It's a very important country. It's big and it's hungry. And how are we going to feed our people? And so for them, it's very, very important. 57.8% of global production is coming from China. In second place, it's Indonesia, 14.7 million metric tons of product. Indonesia has the longest coastline in the world. They consume more fish than all terrestrial meats combined. Again, if you look at Indonesia, most of these countries, you'll find that fish is also the cheapest form of animal protein for people to consume. Of course, there are other segments where it's more expensive, but if you want a cheap product, also it's there for the people. The other countries, India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Philippines, Korea, they're all Asian countries. And then it's followed by Egypt, Norway, Chile, and then Myanmar. But the point I wanted to just show again was that very much it's an Asian phenomenon, and it's something that has had a long tradition in this region. If we look at the different components of the aquaculture segment, we have 54 million metric tons of fish. The important point to mention is that the majority of the fish, 85% of the fish production are freshwater fish species. They are carps, they are tilapias, they are catfish, they are colosoma, gouramis, snakeheads. Most of the people on, we live on 29% of our planet, but we also produce a lot of our food on land, and that includes aquaculture. We tend to think that it's mainly offshore. No, it's not. It's the bulk of aquaculture production is of fish production anyway. It's our freshwater fish species still. Then we have the diadromous species like the salmonids, the eels, the barramundis, the milkfish, species that are able to go from freshwater to brackish water. We have about 5.4 million metric tons of these products. And then lastly, we have the marine species, about 3 million metric tons of fish species. Again, if you look at the countries at the bottom, over half of the production of fish is produced in China, followed by India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and then Egypt. The production systems vary widely, depending on the farmer, depending on the money on his or her pocket. We have conventional traditional pond systems, more intensive type pond systems, tank systems, raceway systems, and also we have cage farming systems. And one of the unique things about aquaculture is that when we grow our fish in a cage, whether it's in the coastal zone or a lake or a reservoir, that water is a shared resource. So we have to do it in a responsible way. It's not a resource that we necessarily own. If we look at crustaceans, by production about 9.4 million metric tons, but by value $69 billion. It's a very lucrative sector. We have 6 million tons of shrimp, marine shrimp, and then we have freshwater crustaceans, about 3 million metric tons. The main countries, again, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, India, followed by Ecuador and Thailand. Again, we have a whole variety of different production systems, ranging from traditional extensive organic type systems where we rely on substrates to produce shrimp with no feeding. We have extensive pond systems like in Mexico, in Ecuador, and we have more intensive systems in Thailand. Sorry, this is Indonesia, or in Indonesia again. And then also we have other systems where we try and minimize water use. We try and improve our biosecurity. We have flock-based systems. We have systems where we try and manipulate the environment. And the future, as I see it, with shrimp farming is going to be in systems where, for biosecurity reasons, for reasons for maintaining good biosecurity, removing contaminant threats and pathogen threats, we're going to have to think about how we're going to have our new farming systems. Again, it's something that we've learned from the poultry sector, where the poultry sector was impacted a lot by 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 diseases and had to develop a system that in the end was biosecure. Quickly, just to emphasize, we have also mollusks, 17.5 million metric tons of basically filter feeders, oysters, clams, scallops, and mussels. Again, the largest producers are China, Korea, Chile, Japan, Vietnam, and Spain. These are systems where we can grow our fish. We can also use bivalves to help get those nutrients that are lost to the system. It's ways of growing many species at the same time, but also it's systems which which can benefit maximally from the environment. This picture is on the top. The largest aquaculture producer in Europe is Spain. It's producing mejillon. It's producing Mytilus edulis, basically a filter feeder. But it's a real success story for the country. And then finally, we have our aquatic plants. I'm watching my time, 9 minutes already. We have 32 million metric tons of aquatic plants. They are not seaweeds, they are sea vegetables. The bulk of production is for human consumption. Again, this is China, Indonesia, Korea, Philippines, um, and Japan. Mainly three major types: red seaweeds, brown seaweeds, miscellaneous aquatic plants, and green seaweeds. It's an industry which is able to make maximum benefit of the resources we have, but also ways of producing food for human consumption. This is a good example is China is producing kelp, is producing products rich in iodine, which can be used in human nutrition to help the the problems that we have in some parts of the world with iodine deficiency. In other countries of the world, this is Indonesia, it's employment. It employs people. It is really is a great success story. And so at the end of the day, when I compare aquaculture and agriculture, we're no different. It's just that aquaculture is done in water. But in one big difference between agriculture and aquaculture are the fed species, those species that we have to feed, with a diet. In agriculture, we basically have 18 different types of species that we farm, whether it's chickens or turkeys or hogs or dairy cattle. In aquaculture, we have over 244 different species, but also this is part of the problem we have. And that is that many of the species that we grow, we really don't know what their nutrient requirements are. And so in the end of the day, this is a problem for us. And so now if we turn to the meat of the talk, which is uh, concerning nutrition and feeds. The major fed species are listed here. The pictures you can see um, are listed in this table. They are basically carps, tilapia, shrimp, catfishes, marine fish, freshwater crustaceans, salmonids, other miscellaneous freshwater and diatoms species like colostoma, like gourami, like snakehead, like kachama, milkfish, trout, and eels. And so each of the sectors here, this is the production in millions of tons. This is the growth rate of the sector. This is the value of the sector in US dollars. By value, the number one sector is shrimp, over $38 billion for a product which is only 15 to 20 grams. The consumer likes it, and it's a product that the consumer likes to eat. And so if you look at the feed production for these sectors, I estimate that the production is about 52 million metric tons of feed for carps, tilapias, catfishes, eels, and these species. I've also done some analytics in terms of the estimated growth of the sector, currently about 52 million metric tons of feed and estimated to grow to 56 and approximately 70 million metric tons by the year 2025. Okay, that's the statistics. And so I wanted to leave you with 5 or 6 different major issues as I see it, or challenges. Again, every nutritionist would say things in a different way. This is my perspective. And so the first point is that we have over 244 different species of fish and shrimp for which most information from first feeding to market size to reproduction, we have not got a clue. For some species we do, for salmonids um, especially. For some species, again, a lot of information, but for most species we don't. And for and for and because we don't, the sector has also relied on ingredients like fish meal and fish oil, which were available in large amounts, which from a nutritional perspective are like gold dust. And also at the other side of the spectrum, because we are growing many larval species or broodstock species where we don't entirely know their requirements, we have a sector that's still very much dependent on using live feed in the form of artemia or rotifers or copepods, or also in terms of broodstock, in terms of polychaetes or other species. And so the important point is that as a nutritionist, fish meal is a lovely ingredient, but the important point is that fish meal is not just a source of protein. It's a source of all the essential amino acids. It's a source of nucleotides, of EPA, of DHA, of cholesterol, phospholipids, calcium, phosphorus, selenium, iodine, absence of anti-nutritional factors. As an ingredient, it's a lovely ingredient because it's basically a fish which is just being ground up. But if you want to replace fish meal in a diet as a nutritionist, it's not really difficult. But if you want to replace it, it's not just about replacing protein. It's also about replacing those other nutrients that fish meal supplies. And the alternatives are the plant proteins, the oil seed meals. We have the vertebrate terrestrial animal byproduct meals, the largest source of animal protein available on our planet to use for animal feeding or aquaculture are the byproducts from the production of poultry or the terrestrial sector. We also have the single cell proteins, the bacteria, the yeast, the algae, which is part of the future. And then we have the invertebrate meals, the insect proteins, the polychaetes, the copepods, the krills of the world. These are all invertebrates. They're all potential sources that we can discuss. Um, and the same goes with fish oil. Fish oil as an ingredient, it's made from fish. And so it's not just a source of EPA or DHA, it's also a source of phospholipids. It's also a source of cholesterol. It's also a source of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, choline, and inositol. And also in crustaceans, it's a rich source of carotenoids. So if you want to replace fish oil, the same goes as with fish meal. You have to also look at those other nutrients that fish oil supplies. And so the approaches used by the sector is that we have different plant oils available. We have the vertebrate oils from the terrestrial rendering industry. We have the new algal oils that are coming on the market that have EPA and DHA and arachidonic acid and whatever you want. And then also we have the transgenic plant oils, which are coming in the pipeline as well. These are all sources that'll be available to the feed compounder. The second major issue, and this is really especially now with the coronavirus epidemic, and that is that if you look at Indonesia, yes, it's the second largest aquaculture producer in the world. And the feed sector is very big, it's very important. But like most countries in Asia, like most countries in Latin America, with the exception of Brazil and the US, they have to import most of their ingredients. And normally they have to, pay in dollars. So in the end, it's all about exchange rates. Um, and the prices of the ingredients every year is increasing. So it means that the feed companies have to always try and become more efficient to reduce their cost of feed cost per kilo of fish production. But this is really an important problem for all countries around the world. We also have this increasing concern for the environment and issues of sustainability. As I said before, we grow our fish in public water bodies normally. And so in a sense, the onus is on us to do it in a responsible way. So the trend is more about having more highly digestible feeds, trying to minimize the waste products entering into the environment. I'm checking my time, 18 minutes. Okay, I got 2 minutes. And so this is an important issue, and so this we'll discuss. And number 4 is one of the things that, if you remember, I said that most information is not available on the dietary nutrient requirements of most species, from first feeding to broodstock size. And for this reason, most European feed companies have very extensive R&D facilities to do their work on nutrient requirements, new ingredients. And that's one thing that in many Asian countries, in many Latin American countries, feed companies have trailed a bit. But it's one thing that we have to do. We have to do R&D today for tomorrow. We know that prices are increasing. We know that there are new products on the market, but we have to have our own R&D facilities where we can reduce costs, where we can test new products and new innovations. This is so important. And so this leads into the question that for most countries that have to import their ingredients, obviously their dilemma is how can we better use what we have? And what we have are ingredients that normally have low digestibility, lower protein, high fiber. But using innovative processing techniques, using um, fermentation technology, we can really improve the nutritional value of many of these products that we have available. We can destroy many of these anti-nutritional factors. And if the fish or shrimp doesn't have the enzyme, then we can also pre-digest it, or we can put enzymes in our feed to help the animals. Again, it's something that in the poultry sector has done for a long time, but we also can do very much the same. But these are things that are very, very important for the sector. Now is leading to my last couple of slides, and that is recognition of the important role played by fish and seafood in human nutrition and health, and global food security as a safe and wholesome food products. The beautiful thing about aquaculture is that we can control what we feed the animals that we grow, and so we can control to a certain extent the nutritional profile of the product for the consumer. The important point for everyone to remember is malnutrition still kills more people on this planet than genocide, AIDS, or even the coronavirus. You have nearly 2 billion people, you know, over a quarter of the population that earn less than $3.2 a day. You remember I said there are two types of consumers. There are the consumers that don't have enough money, and so their problem is all about price, 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 price. It's all about having a product that they can afford. And then you have the other type of consumer, which is all about more about sustainability, environmental impact. It's different. But the important point is that we have a problem of undernutrition, where people are not getting sufficient nutrients. And then we have a problem of overnutrition, where the cheapest form of food on the market are fast foods. And these fast foods are normally products that don't lend themselves too well to health. And so this is important. You know, the food that we consume, whether we're rich or whether we're poor, influences our health and our well-being. And this is just an example of the obesity rates with certain countries at the very top and other countries at the very bottom that have very, very different food consumption patterns. And so from a nutritional perspective, you know, we can improve the nutritional profile of our products for human consumption. This is a paper that I recently produced this year, but called it Fish for Health, but basically showing that we can really manipulate the composition of and the nutritional profile of the fish for human consumption. So again, from a nutritional perspective, and from a health perspective, we have a product which really is a godsend from the point of view of of the planet and its need. And if you compare aquatic food products at the top with the majority of the terrestrial products that we consume, they have a much higher protein content, and the fatty acids are normally of the omega-3 type, and they are much leaner, normally have a much lower energy value. Whereas most of the terrestrial products have a lower protein content, the fats are normally saturated and of the wrong type. So really we have a very good product. If we look at aquatic plants, again, you go to any Japanese restaurant from a nutritional perspective as well, these products are really very, very, very good for you. And so the important point I wanted to make, and the message that is important for you to realize, is that if you look at protein consumption in Asia, fish and seafood, whether it's farmed or whether it's wild, it's up there as a major source of animal protein. If you look in Indonesia, this will be number 2. If in Japan, it will be number 2 also. But you can see it's much more than all the terrestrial meats combined. If you look in Africa, capture fisheries is still more important than aquaculture at the moment. But again, it's affordable, it's cheap, and it's a major source of animal protein consumed after milk. But then if you go to Latin America, to Central America, you'll see here that fish and seafood consumption is very low compared to other products. In Latin America, the same. In Europe, more or less the same. And also America, the same. And with our issues of diabetes and obesity. And so the important point I'm leaving you with is that from a nutritional perspective, we really have a product that's really important. But the message that we should be giving to people is from the health perspective, because obesity, coronary heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, these are all ailments that are, sorry, that's my phone. I have to turn that off. And my last slide, that was it. Thank you very much. Again, this is just an overview of how I see the sector. But the point I wanted to leave is just that the important point is the nutritional, the health perspective of fish and aquatic food products. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. That was 25 minutes.
So thank you, Albert, so much.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. How many minutes you're over?
5 minutes over.
It's okay. You're excused. Thank you. But thank you so much for, I think, extensive presentation in very short time. A large presentation, large topic, and you touched a lot of key factors that we are facing today. I would ask the audience to type in their questions again if they have any, and we will try to summarize and put them together for you during our discussion. I'd also like to invite Susie to join. I think she is around somewhere. She will join us hopefully soon. Thank you, Susie. Good to see you.
I'm here. I'm here.
So we have some questions coming before in our hand. It's like first to Albert, right? We heard something about that how, because your first PhD project that brought you to this field, but what made you to continue this, and traveling the world and working with FAO, then you left FAO, then Hawaii, right, as professor, and then independent consultant. What are the motivations? What are the driving force behind this commitment to the industry and to the people?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think the thing that opened my eyes was FAO. Like a lot of scientists, we do our study, we do our PhD, and then we teach, and we tend to think we know everything about aquaculture. And we really know this about aquaculture. And it's only when you start visiting farmers in Malawi, in Madagascar, in Papua New Guinea, in Thailand, or wherever it is that you really start understanding that aquaculture is very different from what sometimes we think of it. You know, in the UK, what we thought of it as trout or salmon or eels, and yes, for us it's like this, but in other countries it's very different. Whether it's, you know, whether the aim is on food security or profit or as a cash crop. And so FAO helped to open my eyes from allowing me, you know, to work. So far, I've worked in more than 44 different countries for more than a month. And every country is very different, you know, and every farmer is different. But the nutrition is the same in the fact that feed and feeding is always their biggest cost. You know, but when a farmer in Malawi who has 2 fish, 2 tilapia per square meter says, "Oh, how much protein do I put in the feed?" And I say, "Well, sorry, it's not been done yet." You know, that at the end of the day, you know, as I said before, we're here to serve the farmer and the farmer's needs. And so it's really important that the research that we do or the feeds that we do are tailored to the needs of the aquaculture sector that we're here to serve. I left FAO not because I didn't love or believe in FAO and what it stands for, but as a civil servant, our job was always with government. And at the end of the day, we need solutions, not, you know, so I would write a lot, but in the end, we need solutions for the sector. And Hawaii was a chance of, okay, here is some R&D money, do it. And that was the main reason why I gave up a permanent job for life for a passion. But in the end, you know, that's just the way I am. I'm sorry.
Okay, now coming to the next questions to both of you. It's a big topic, the sustainability. Call it buzzword, right? That's what Peter told me. It's a buzzword, sustainability. But what do you think about the sustainability issues, right? And about the consumers, will they become increasingly concerned about these issues? In Asia especially, I know we know that in Europe or in developed countries they are, but there's a bifurcation of the system. One system is for export, one system for local consumption. But if the local consumers become more aware of these issues, right, welfare, environmental footprint, etc., what do you think about that?
Who? Me? Albert?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Especially I'm targeting small farmers, small producers, right? They cannot afford to this.
You better answer it first, Susie. I'm going to put my foot in it, I'm sure.
I think that sustainability is an issue which people are very concerned about as a concept. But when it comes down to the specifics of aquaculture and fish, I don't think many people know very much about it. And what they do know about it is being driven by food service and restaurateurs who will stick a label on their menu or on their fish, and they'll say sustainably farmed. Doesn't mean much, but that's what they say. From the aquaculture feed industry perspective and aquaculture in general, you know, we're very concerned about fish meal, you know, about fish sustainability of the that's what most people think of in our industry as they think about fish. But I believe that increasingly, and a lot driven by the feed companies, I have to say, they are becoming extremely, the big feed companies, who I shouldn't name, but we all know who they are starting to be very concerned about sustainability, and they're aware of deforestation, about ethical production of the ingredients that are going in, about water footprint. The general consumer doesn't really care, I believe. I think they still want a good bit of cheap fish on their plate, basically. And I think it's pretty, I think we're more aware of it than the consumers are. but it's a trend that's going to become more and more, or an awareness that's going to be growing, I'm sure, as time goes on. But right now, people just know what they read in headlines on Twitter, Facebook. Farmed fish are bad, you know, and I have this argument with people the whole time. I think people, they don't, in general, don't have any real interest or knowledge about sustainability in aquaculture production. And if we want them to, then the education has got to come from the restaurateurs and the food service people. And it's up the farmer's job to do that, to brief these people and to convince them that they need to be caring about slave ships and about, like I said, water footprint and deforestation. And, you know, I mean, in Europe, it's all carbon footprint. I don't know how long that's going to go on for, but that's my view on it anyway. Old and cynical.
Thank you,
No,
Susie. And Albert?
I think we're all missing the boat. You remember I said, first of all, we've got to realize that there are two types of consumers, right? There are those that have and those that don't have. You have 46% of the global population earn less than $5.5 a day. Nearly half the world's population, you know, are struggling. And for them, it's all about price. They couldn't care a monkeys about sustainability. You know, for them, it's, can I, you know, with that $200 or $300 a month, I've got to feed my family, I've got to clothe my kids. It's everything. It's like, you know, life is not fair. It all depends on where you're born. And so that's one type of consumer. And the other type of consumer where we're having this webinar is, I'm saying we're missing the boat. I say that we're missing the boat because what we should be promoting is fish for health. From a nutrition, you know, we have this global epidemic of obesity, of coronary heart disease, of diabetes, of stress, hypertension, mainly because we have this epidemic for consuming fast foods, which are basically, from a nutritional health perspective, not the best thing since sliced bread. Whereas from the aquaculture perspective or from the capture fisheries perspective, we have a product that's, from a health perspective, is really something that we can sell, but we're not doing that. At the moment, you have aquaculture normally fighting with capture fisheries instead of pooling the resources and really, you know, fanning the fire. That's why I wrote the paper Fish for Health, and that was trying to get it off. Do I think sustainability is important? Yes, of course it's important. But I think for the average consumer in in Europe or wherever, they are very concerned about stress. You know, with the COVID, the people that have these, that have, like me, that have the susceptibility to some of these complicating factors. And so I really think that yes, sustainability is important, but also we have to insert the fish for health part, which is really something that these other people do not have.
The comment about being the best thing since sliced bread was rather probably not the best analogy, because you know, but it's right in as much as, you know, bread is a staple food, and the milling industry tried extremely hard to start, you know, supporting more the artisanal bakers and promoting, but it's exactly the same. You've got these two types of consumer. The average, the consumer, the mum that's got to feed 4 kids on a limited budget is going to go to the supermarket and buy sliced bread.
Yeah, or buy the cheapest protein that they have. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. You know, why would you go in and spend 5 times the price for having a few seeds on the top? You know, they don't care that nutritionally it's a much better product because they can't afford to care. You know, I think what illustrates this really well was many years ago, I went to an aquaculture business, a very large one in Indonesia, And they also took me around their chicken production units. And one of the directors of the company who was escorting me around at the poultry farm, their breeding facilities, said to me, "Can you answer me a question?" I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I had some visitors from America here last week." He said, "And they asked me a question and I was very embarrassed because I didn't know how to answer it." So I said, "Well, you know, what was the question?" And he said, "They asked me, are the chickens happy?" And I didn't know what he meant. And to me, that completely summed up the difference between people, say, poor people in Indonesia who just want to feed their family, and the people that are in California saying, "Oh, but it's got to be organic and they've got to be raised in outside, and we've got," you know, there's a whole two different stratas, but the bulk of aquaculture, I think, is going to be a long way before we get it all sustainable and, you know, virtuous and the way ideally we would like it to be. It's not going to happen overnight, though.
So I agree. It is about food security and then nutritional security. So yes, they have maybe have.
But Susie, can I just add just one?
Please go ahead.
It's just, I think that the biggest ace that we have in our hand is the fish for health part, compared to all the competing other types of terrestrial food products out there.
Right.
You know, but we're not playing it yet.
Right.
I think this whole topic kind of leads on naturally to the image of fish. You know, we should be, if we're not, consumer driven. I mean, that is the way markets work. If you're going to be successful, you supply a need. You don't create a product and then try and create a need. So the consumer has to want it. And one of the things that has been I've been banging the drum about for a long time now is that we get appalling PR in a lot of places. I think it is getting slightly better, but we all know, we don't need to go over it. We know how people, journalists are lazy and they just dredge up 20-year-old photographs of, you know, a silted up ocean bed underneath a sea cage and say, "Look at how they're polluting the oceans." And I mean, we've all seen it and we've all heard it all and we know who these people are. But we don't have, I think we really need an advocate for fish and seafood, not just farmed, but for all of it, to drive home this point that Albert is making about the health of the product. And we need an overall advocate, we need an organization that's going to be proactively putting the good news out there, because we've got a very good story to tell.
Perfect. Yes,
but,
agree with you.
But when we tell it, we tend to be preaching to the choir. We tend to be telling each other. We're not really telling anybody out there. And if we are, it's generally a reaction to bad press we've had when somebody gets on their high horse and says, "That's not true," you know, and you know, you kind of lost it at that point. You need to have a good story. We need good PR and we need an advocacy, a global one for all species. Not just, I mean, there are little units like the Canadian salmon farmers have got theirs, but I mean, for all of us, we need to get our word out there. We don't tell our story, and we've got a good one.
Right. So we spend a lot of time on sustainability. Now coming to the next question, which is kind of critical as well, very critical. I see.
Sorry, Pepe.
Next question. There's a lot of hype and money, right, being invested into alternative proteins, novel proteins, new proteins like insect meal and algae meal. We see a lot of money going into there, or single cell proteins. Right. How long will it take to dominate the market? Number one, first question. Second question is, what are the bottlenecks, right, for them to become mainstream? And third question is more critical. We have a lot of protein sources, soybean meal, animal protein byproducts, and fish meal. If we look at the soybean meal or plant proteins or animal byproducts, some animal byproducts, they are not very highly digestible. We see right from 65% to 85% or 80% digestible. And so there's a large chunk of these proteins being unused and unutilized and being wasted and going to the environment. So where should we put our focus, or we should focus on the both novel proteins at the same time, improving the quality of existing protein sources, right? That's the third part, which is, I think, the final part of this question, which is more important in my view. And I want your opinion, both of you. Wants to start first? Albert or
Me or Susie? Okay, me.
Okay.
We have to look at it from the point of view of the feed compounder, the feed manufacturer. To make feed, you need to make it, 365 days a year of a consistent quality. And so insect proteins, yeah, they sound great. But until we start producing hundreds of thousands of tons of the product, the industry isn't going to be able to use them. Because you really want to make a consistent product throughout the year. In Asia, especially in China, the use of fermentation technology to improve the nutritional value of soya, canola, lupin, many of the conventional animal proteins, vegetable protein sources. This is going really, really good. And and these I think will become available much sooner than later. They tend to be a bit more expensive because everything is always compared with the price of soybean meal, which is essentially very cheap. But as we all know, soybean has 14 different or 15 different anti-nutritional factors. And depending on how you produce it, can also have, herbicide residues and their breakdown products. So in the end, it's all about processing. And fermentation technology, you can do it aerobically, anaerobically. It's a very good way of removing several of the anti-nutritional factors and improving the nutritional value. The other way, obviously, is also using enzymes outside the body or inside the body to also improve the digestibility of those carbohydrates, to open up those boxes. Probably in the short term, I think single cell proteins will come on stream much faster. Bacteria can double their weight in half an hour, yeast in 2 hours, algae in 6 hours. And so depending on the substrate that you use, these products are going to come online very, very fast. Many countries, many companies are engaged in this space.
Susie?
Well,
Sorry, Albert.
Sorry, Albert, didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
and
you.
then the last part again was the largest competitor to fish meal and fish oil are the products that come from the rendering industry, from the production of chickens or the terrestrial livestock sector. And what I like about it is that it's feed grade that we're going to use to produce food. It's not something that's potentially food grade that we're going to take away from one to feed to the other. That as an aquaculture sector, as in terms of sustainability, we've got to use the byproducts, the feed grade materials, and turn it into food rather than going for potentially food grade resources. Anyway, sorry, Susie. That was
No. I was just going to say really that with the novel ingredients, which I think Kabir was referring to in his original question, most of these companies have hit this classic chasm between pilot scale to industrial scale, and it's really chicken and egg. There has to be the demand for them to invest the millions into production, and not just demand, but consistent demand. And on the other hand, the feed manufacturer has to know, as Albert said, he has to know that he's going to have a consistent, reliable product and that it's going to be price competitive. And for a while, it looked like nobody quite had the answer to that. But what we're seeing now is that the larger feed manufacturers with huge resources, the Skrettings and the Biomars of this world, are partnering with insect producers, with yeast producers, with algal producers, the SCPs, and they are giving them a guaranteed outlet for their product, and together they're growing that. How this is going to pan out for the smaller feed producers and for the smaller alternative ingredient producers, I'm not sure. But certainly what you see the partnerships with, like I said, Skretting and also with Cargill, and Skretting with people like Vera Maris with their algal oil, and with various protein, what am I trying to say, algal companies and insect protein companies. It's moving along, but it's being done in partnership, and it's really the only way you can do it, because, you know, like I said, it's really chicken and egg situation.
But can I add to that, Susie?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that is that at the end of the day, also it depends on the consumer where you're selling your product. And that is, if one consumer will say, sorry, you cannot use genetically
Yes.
modified ingredient, or you cannot use rendered products, or you cannot use, you know, it's going to depend on whether it's going to be domestic consumption, depending on the country, and in other countries, it's persuading the consumer that it's that we're feeding insects to our fish or to our shrimp, you know. But
Well,
at the end of the day, they have to have the buy-in to the use of those ingredients.
for sure, but you know, we need everything we can get.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I think in the end, insects and algae and single cell proteins and the like are going to be just other ingredients that people can use, and people will use them to a marketing advantage if they can say, you know, that whatever they can for the traceability and all the rest of it. But the plant proteins have got their problems, as we all know, with the anti-nutritional factors, with the mycotoxin problems. But we need them all, and now there's a lot of research going on and a lot of people working on plant oils, you know, like the canola, varieties of canola which are being bred specially for aquaculture, and there's our favorite soybean oil, of course, and soybean meal, but there are a lot of people jumping into the space now, and I think there's room for everybody.
So there was the last part of the questions as well, about the unused or underutilized protein sources, right? What to do with them, because that's a big waste that destroying the environment stuffs. So
well, I'm pleased to see that there are a lot more byproducts and fish processing waste being used now in aquaculture, because it's taken a long time and it's been ridiculous that fishermen have been just dumping bycatch. I know they're not supposed to, but they do, and because they don't get any money for it. So you're seeing more and more people utilizing those sort of products. The animal protein byproducts had a huge hit with the you know, the mad cow disease thing. It gave it a very bad kind of feeling, and it took a long time for Europe to allow PAPs back in. But by the time they did, a lot of people, everybody got tainted with the same brush. But I think it's coming back. Lots of poultry byproducts, of course, which is a staple. But I think they're utilizing more and more of those products. It's what the feed industry is built on.
But I think what we have to do is that we also have to give them incentives. At the moment, you know, 30% of all the food that we produce on this planet, we waste through bad storage, bad transportation, fungal growth, or whatever. 30%. But at the moment, we don't give incentives to feed companies if they use more byproducts, whether that byproduct comes from processed fish or, you know, that we should try and encourage them in that way.
Like plants or animal sources.
Not plants. No, I mean there are plants and there are plants, but it's like, but using the byproduct more than using the product that will compete with direct human consumption, for example.
Right. So we can tell them as co-product, not byproduct. Or
yeah, no. So it's like, for example, within the best or aquaculture feed manufacturing practice, we might have a benefit for the fish meal people, but we don't give a benefit for what about all those other byproducts that the industry can use as well?
So we have few questions from the audience as well right now. I think some of them are answered about sustainability uh, issues, and Susie talked about GMO plant oils coming for LC PUFA, long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids like DHA, EPA, so genetically modified plants. We talked about that as well, but issue could be the GMO issue, right? Whether they're accepted by
I
the
knew some leaders,
consumers
yeah.
or the industry or not. So uh, that's the question, right? It is a big issue in Europe. I think in India as well. India, there was a lot of movement against GMO. Although our life is GMO, like we would not like, especially in poor or developing countries without GMO crops would be like we still be starving. But how we deal with it, right? It's not about GMO, non-GMO. It's about provide real information to the consumers, which is missing. I see like consumers are not getting real information, like which
Can
is we just started with. Please,
can I
Albert's
try?
please.
dying to answer that, I can see.
I know, but people
Go
won't
ahead.
like
Go
it.
ahead.
They won't
Go
like what
ahead.
I'm going to say. All I'm just saying is one of the problems with the consumer, with the GM products, was always because the genetic manipulation was for the benefit of the producer, not the consumer. It was, I can use, it was always for the benefit of the farmer. And it's not as if any of these products, I mean, in the US, the majority of the food that we consume is genetically modified. Is the consumer told about that? No, no way. But the consumer can go to Whole Foods or can go to Down to Earth and maybe buy foods that are non-genetically modified. But the point I'm getting at is that we have, so that's the first part, is that the benefit was always for the companies that produce a genetic modification, whether it's canola, whether it's soybean, whether it's maize, whether it's whatever. And that benefit normally was we can use more of this particular herbicide. And the problem with the genetic modification is that from a nutritional perspective, the Norwegians have done most of the work on this. There is no difference, nutritionally speaking, between GM or non-GM soya, for example. But when you look at the histology of the intestine, when you look at the spleen and the response in certain organs, something is going on. And we all know now that we have more bacterial cells in our body than we have human cells. And it's essentially a black box. Have all these genetically modified foods and feeds been tested in humans beforehand? No, never. With the soybean, 95% of the soybean is Roundup Ready soybean. But it has a problem in that the soybean also contains glyphosate. It also contains AMP, which are byproducts of the glyphosate degradation. So not only do you have the anti-nutritional factors, you also have these residues. And although people might not like it, but WHO has labeled glyphosate as a carcinogen. And now you have all these claims against Bayer paying billions of dollars for lymphoma. I am not saying that but all I'm just saying is that there's no smoke without fire, that most of these genetically modified products have not really been tested. I mean, of all the scientists in the world, the ones doing most of the work of this are the Norwegians. And that is because in Norway, for them, it's very important to know what the Europeans, which is their biggest market, also for their salmon. But they really have done a lot of very, very, very good work. And the consensus at the moment is that there is no real nutritional difference or harm. Have they looked at the residues of the herbicides? Not yet, not really, but all I'm just saying is that we've got to do our due diligence. So in the end, countries like India and other countries can follow their own beliefs. But just because we're consuming the products now doesn't mean that it's necessarily safe.
It's very difficult, though. We're back to the poor countries and the poor consumer and the rich consumer conundrum again, because it's very difficult for a country that has a large impoverished population not to take genetically modified seed, which is going to give them a much bigger crop. And they overlook it because they can grow more cheaper and feed more people. So there's a lot of work to do there. And I mean, do you remember the issue with golden rice? Do you remember the golden rice thing?
Yes.
Where
Iron.
that was created for the benefit of people. It was a rice that was high in nutrients for starving children.
Yes.
And USA donated gazillions of tons of this stuff, and it was rejected because it was GMO. So what, you rather your people starve?
I know, but
where do you go? It's a complex issue. I don't think, and we cannot just turn the clock back. GMs have been going on for a long time. The first ones, I think, were in the 1950s, which were tomatoes, which were created for Heinz tomato sauce. I mean, we've been having GMOs for a long time, so you can't turn the clock back, but, maybe we can regulate better. I'm not pro-GMO, it's a fact.
Susie,
I'm not pro-GMO either, but we live in GMO, we consume GMO. Every single day, every single time we eat something, right?
But but the point I'm getting at, Kabir and Susie, is that the onus is on them to show that it's safe.
Yes, information is not there.
It's a bit like the vaccine with the COVID vaccines. At the end of the day, we've got to do our efficacy trials, and we've got to demonstrate that it has no potential negative effect. But because it's always been in the private in a pocket of the private sector, it's been, less transparent. And I think, we have a good story to tell. When I worked for FAO, we had this big lobby there from the GM biotechnology sector. This is going to feed the world, but it's not.
Thank you. We have two. I think we can take two more questions. The next one, we all answered almost all the questions we have from audiences. Just two more.
I think I've made more enemies now. But
No. It's we all are friends. Frenemies. Okay, friend and enemies can be friend as well. So the next question is about. There's a lot of hype again on biofloc. If you go in India and Bangladesh, that part of the world, everyone is jumping into biofloc. Who never ate any fish or who never touched water in their life, jumping into biofloc technology. And it's a lot of, if you go on YouTube, there's hundreds of videos on biofloc system. Number one. Number two is RAS, and there's biofloc is for cheap people. Like it's a low cost technology, and people are jumping into it. And second one is the RAS, which is expensive technology. And you see, in China, we'll be producing 200,000 tons of RAS salmon. This they're planning to do in the next 2 years. So the question is, where are we going with this, right? Will that be the mainstream in future for land-based technologies because we will have more control on the system? And where is the who will get benefited from what? That's another question from social perspective, right? So one is like production perspective. What are the challenges? We have waste management and things, and then feeding the system as well, biofloc, and those are technical challenges. And the second one is social challenges. Who will be benefited from what? Okay. Again, who will start? Okay. Albert?
Can I?
Yeah. Go ahead. You.
Biofloc. I mean, what's nice about biofloc is that it's from a nutritional perspective, one of the most successful animals on our planets are ruminants. And these are animals that rely on bacterial fermentation in an anaerobic environment. Biofloc is essentially the same type of process, but in an aerobic environment. And the beautiful thing about the system is that you feed the bacteria, and they make the protein, they make the amino acids, they make the vitamins. And so I really do think that biofloc systems have got a lot of promise. There are many ways of doing them. Obviously, one of the problems for the farmer is that we need oxygen 24 hours a day. Feed companies are in the business of selling feed and selling additives and selling all these things. So maybe biofloc systems allow you to hopefully reduce costs. And so I personally feel that biofloc has got a long way to go, but it's very, very exciting. But basically, again, it's an aerobic ruminant.
Rumen, yeah.
About RAS systems, the sea. You know, at the moment we produce our food on 29% of our planet, okay, on land. The 9 billion people that are going to be on this planet are going to be mainly on land. And so agriculture is going to have to produce more soya, more wheat, more food products. And aquaculture too is going to be very important for that. The problem with RAS systems is that RAS systems work very well also with shrimp and flock systems. As long as, I don't know, 20 years ago, I saw systems in China using RAS systems using flock for shrimp. It's possible. It's possible. But we have to change a bit the way we do our farming. Instead of using traditional paddle wheels, we have to start using things that wastewater treatment has been using for years, special type of aeration systems. In terms of the sea, we have to stop treating our sea as our toilet. You know, at the moment, you know, over 70% of our planet is the sea, and that sea has lots of potential for mollusks, for seaweeds, and for finfish aquaculture. But at the moment, we discharge all our domestic sewage into the sea. The only legislation is for suspended solids and BOD. And so all these contaminants are coming up the food chain. So we really have to, you know, improve how we treat our sea. But RAS systems, if you remember when I gave an example of shrimp is a sector that's, yes, it's over $60 billion worth, but it's suffering from different diseases every year. And that's because we culture the shrimp in an open environment. There is no biosecurity. And so the way that the poultry sector got around that is by growing poultry indoors, controlling the environment, controlling the temperature, controlling the humidity. And with flock systems and doing the shrimp indoors, you can do the same. Can everybody do that? No, it's going to be certain segments of the sector, but I really think that these systems are going to work. They have a lot of potential.
Thank you. Susie, any comment on that?
No, you're asking whether you thought they were the way of the future, and I think
from the social perspective.
Well, the appeal of RAS, of course, is that you, as you mentioned, you've got total control of the environment, and the huge drawback for RAS farmers is the cost.
Right.
But you know, with more and more people utilizing solar energy and alternative forms of energy, this makes and the engineering now becoming more sophisticated, more and more people putting efforts in there, that I think that they are becoming more affordable, and you are seeing large successful RAS farms. I personally find it a little strange to see salmon in an indoor system, but
I can give you one example. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think there's a huge appeal there because people see it as a way of producing complete, what's the word I'm looking for, organic fish. Right. I mean, it's nonsense that you can't call a wild salmon organic because you can't actually trace everything it's eaten and where it's been, but you can call a fish grown inside in a RAS system organic because you can control every factor, and that is a huge plus for a lot of people because you can control disease and you can control all the inputs really. So I can see it going forward. You see more and more of them coming up, and also you've got the scale. You can actually have small RAS systems for urban use. So you could stick them on top of rooftops
That's where I was coming to about urban system. I met someone in India who did his computer science and mechanical engineering in US, and then moved to India. And he liked fish and aquaculture, so he built a system, and it can fit into a 40-feet container. It's RAS system, and you can do one single species or one unit, and you can take it anywhere. And through AI, is that you can control from anywhere with a mobile phone. You can check, see, and control. So I think this can be affordable, right? For a small, I say small, medium farmers with some bank loan, they can afford it. And if these things become mainstream, I see a great future of this kind of aquaculture, RA system or biofloc. Everyone is trying to do it, and we will perfect, and 80% will leave, 20% will sustain
No,
in future.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, on the only other thing about the RAS system, Susie, is that for people that want to use transgenic salmon, you know, that one of the pluses of the indoor RAS system is that there is no interaction with wild population. So I'm sure these, you know, that with salmon, with shrimp, RAS systems will be part of the future. About urban systems, yes, you have, you know, we have large cities like Sao Paulo, like Mexico City, like Singapore, and so urban systems, aquaculture systems have come, you know, are very much in the vogue, using hydroponics where we can use the waste products from the feed-fed systems to grow spices and vegetables. It's all part of the you know, the sustainability issue of it's an important sector and it's going to grow.
But it's not
So
going to be providing the bulk of the fish that or shrimp that we're eating. You know, it's going to be
Not
a
yet,
small
not yet.
sector.
It's going to serve certain specialized internal markets. You know,
point is
domestic markets.
nothing is perfect. We always need to improve ourselves, what we do and what we want to produce for the consumers, for us as well. The last question, what is the future? Farming the sea, right? So aquaculture can play a major role. This is the final question, I think, today's final question. Is it the future, farming the sea, and how we can achieve that, right? Use it not using it as a toilet, but as a usable resource, a renewable resource for the human on this planet. Okay.
No, of course we can. I mean, farming this, you know, as I said before, you know, 70% of our planet is covered with seawater. But the problem is that all our domestic wastewater from all the countries around the world in the end up in the rivers and in the sea. And those contaminants, those persistent organic pollutants are coming up the food chain. I mean, it really is. And it's either coming up from the food chain or it's coming also from the dust and the pollutants coming from the rain. And the point that I was getting at is that 90% of what we produce at the sea at the moment are aquatic plants and mollusks, filter feeders. It's called bioremediation. It's a real good success story. With aquaculture, we're still on the finfish side, still looking to find those species. But again, this is another advantage of RAS systems, that when you grow a fish in an open environment, you're going to be subjected to parasites from the wild. You're going to get, you know, you're going to get mammals, you're going to get all types of predators coming in. So that's why RAS systems is really part of the solution for some countries, because it really is going to stop, you know, changing their image within the wider community. Another aspect is that some countries, again, Europe is taking the lead, in Spain, in the Canaries, in Norway, where some countries have offshore platforms, you know, old offshore platforms for the oil industry, which have now been turned into offshore platforms to investigate offshore aquaculture, to see, okay, what sort of technologies can we do? And again, one of the, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think on that same strain, you know, the interest in multi-trophic aquaculture
Yes, IMTA.
is wonderful, you know, and if we can do it right, it could be a win-win.
We have been doing this for thousands of years, right? If you go
Yes.
back to China.
No, China has been, that's why I showed the
Yeah.
picture
Right.
of
Yeah,
the farm
but
in China.
I'm talking about these big ocean platforms, you
Yes,
know, if
right.
we can utilize the whole water column, and we can
Right.
be self-sustaining and
Right.
self-cleaning.
Yes. It's
That would be
about
tremendous.
No, I mean, just to add to the final point on that one is that there's plenty of nutrients in the sea. The problem is most of them are further down. But using artificial upwelling, using wave energy, you can bring them up to grow your seaweeds, to even
right.
grow your anchoveta, to produce your, you know, it's you know, another
And
form
that's
of.
something we've been very slow to. We're very quick to take everything out of the ocean, but we've been very slow to put anything back in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and as Albert's saying, you know, we sit back, and Albert's heard this spiel from my husband Warren how many times now, but his big thing at the moment is, you know, we sit back and we let El Nino determine the upwelling. Why aren't we doing anything to activate that? Is it so hard? You know, we're not putting any research dollars into the ocean, into feeding the ocean, into nurturing the ocean, into utilizing the ocean properly, because researchers depend on grants, and grants come from people with vested interest, and there hasn't been the interest in the ocean, and we need to change that.
Okay.
And
So we are almost, sorry, Albert, the last word?
Last part for Susie.
Last word, yes.
I mean, I wrote a proposal, I'm sure I didn't get it, but I called it ocean gardens. But that was the whole point. The whole point is that using artificial upwelling, we can bring those nutrients opposite the coast of Africa to produce those mollusks, to produce that food which the continent really, really needs. You know, it's a paradigm shift from the way we're thinking, but it's, you know, Warren is right.
And one of the reasons why people don't want to do it is because how do you contain your inventory? If you're going to invest all these dollars, research dollars, or all these commercialization dollars into this plot of water, and all your fish are swimming away, and you're not benefiting directly, that's a big disincentive for a lot of people. But there are ways of doing it. And, you know, because of projects we've done at aquafeed.com in the Pacific, you look at the opportunities that there are in the atolls, in like the Marshall Islands and places of where you could actually contain. Some of them are like 70 kilometers across, some of these atolls. You could get a very big fish farm in there and contain the inventory. You know,
Yeah.
there's ways to do it.
But you think about it, Susie, it's just, sorry, Kabir, now you asked the question.
No, that's okay.
Within fisheries, we also have something called capture-based fisheries and also culture-based fisheries. And that is where we, for example, the yellowtail industry in Japan depends on wild-caught yellowtail. Or the mussel farming in Spain depends on the wild seed. You know, there are ways and marriages that we can do.
Yes.
And I just think that we, you know, like you say, Susie hit it on the nail. It's all about ownership and privatization. And so, but it's, you know, it's the way we have to go.
Okay. So it's about stocking the reservoirs, right? Or lakes with, or rivers, similar we're talking about, Albert. But we are almost at the end. I think we are 1 minute over, but thank you so much, Susie, for, I think you're a little bit pressure, but it was okay. Thank you. It worked. it worked. And Albert will be the co-host from the next session.
No.
He will begrudgingly agree, but it's okay. So thank you everyone to be with us for over 90 minutes. Our next session will be, I can declare the date, but not the guest. Guest you will see in the advert. But the date is July 16, Thursday. So mark your calendar. And I would like to, at the end, I would like to thank Jeffo to give us tremendous support to to have this platform and the marketing support and the media support and the media partners. They have been tremendous help, and they have been big help in this one as well, and will continue to get help. And helping each other is a symbiosis, I think, for the industry and for all of us. So thank you again. Have a good night from here. Good morning from Asia. I think good evening from somewhere else, right? And good very early morning in Europe. We have some people from Europe as well, from Germany and some
Cup
other
of tea
countries.
time here, Kabir.
Yes.
Cup of tea time here.
Yes,
Yep.
it's a tea time in the British, tea time. Tea.
Thank you, Kabir, for the opportunity to be
Thank you
here.
so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah, for
everything.
your help. Really
It's been a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Yeah, we'll meet again in near
Yep.
future. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.